Welcome to the Blind Zone, where curiosity brings its own reward. What am I curious about today? I'm curious about how prepared I really am. Now, today's just going to be a practical talk. I've talked about the spiritual side of being prepared, but today's just practical stuff. And in a few weeks, I'm going to talk about a water filtration system that I made. And then after that, I'm going to talk to you about a solar oven that I made. And again, I'm not spending a lot of money on these projects, but they intrigue me so that I wanted to find out for myself. But today we're just going to talk about some very basic things. And obviously, there's people who are uh, preppers that are much more into this than I am. I just got into this game late because the Holy Spirit told me a couple months ago to prepare. And so that's what I'm doing. Now, you have to understand that in an emergency, there's a couple of things you need to know. For one, you need to know the proximity, how close you are to the disaster. You need to understand how prepared you are. And then the third thing is you need to have a plan. And when I mean plan, you need to have a plan that you adjust hourly or daily or weekly or however long, but you need to keep a plan in place. You need to think through a bunch of scenarios, and then you have to have a plan for each. Do not think that you are going to be able to, when the disaster happens, that you're going to be able to figure it out intuitively. That doesn't work. So plan for every contingencies, and then we'll talk about the three sets of disasters that may happen, and whether you stay or whether you leave, because that's another big consideration as well. And I've noticed recently that FEMA has come out with something that they're telling you to at least have 2 weeks of storehouse for water, food, fuel, and medicine. And my friend is driving and she saw a big billboard that said, "You prepare for a wedding, so you better prepare for disaster." And that's really true. We prepare for really good things in our lives to happen. And we don't think that the bad things are going to happen. But if you don't plan for them or you don't prepare in case they do, then you're caught unawares. So, what I was thinking about, I like to think of these disasters in one of three categories. Disaster one, it's a localized disaster, either a natural incident or a man made thing. And it's, again, temporary. The water may be out, the electricity may be out, it may be out for a short amount of time. But eventually, you understand that city services are coming back. And then the second disaster is like disaster one, only it's for a longer duration, either again man made or natural disaster. And you have to prepare to think, what will you do in the interim until those services come back? And then in disaster three, everything's gone. You either through a man made disaster or a natural disaster, and you have to decide what you're going to do. And again, proximity, how prepared you are, and a plan is what you need. You need all of those for all three disasters, but the third one is the most uh, life life challenging one of all, because things as you know it are no longer available. And even in scenario one and two, the services that you used to know were very there for you may not be, and you're going to have to know what to do in the interim. Now, again, I'm sitting here on my couch. There's nothing out but rain outside, but what if something were to happen? So you need to decide also what you do if you stay in your house or what you do if you go. Now, what I have noticed about all the preparedness videos, these people are sitting on some big piece of property and they have all the things available to them that they've worked years at storing up. I don't have that. Um, I don't have that capability because I'm in a small community and there's no way that I have access to all kinds of things. What I also didn't recognize or realize before is when things go really sideways and you lose water. Now, there's a multitude of ways to get water, which again, I'll talk about in a future video. But if you don't have a way to use your bathroom? What do you do with that? What do you do with your own waste products? And many, many years ago, when I worked at a doctor's office, the doctor said, if you're living somewhere and the doctors are threatening to strike or the garbage men are threatening to strike, he said you do whatever it takes to keep those garbage men employed, because if trash builds up, then you have then you'll have an overpopulation of rats and mice, and they all carry huge disease and bugs. So if you don't figure out what you're going to do with the waste that you're producing, both bodily and in your home, you're going to end up with a bug problem, which I can't imagine anything creepier than that. So having some pest control stuff on hand, is advisable, but is that going to be enough? And I'm not telling you this to scare you, but I'm just telling you this because in an emergency, if you have not thought out your routes, what you're going to do if you choose to leave or where you're going to go, because we've all seen it when the hurricanes come and the gridlock is on the TV showing that everybody decided at that very moment they were going to leave. Because when I had my friends that were in the Maui wildfire, he said it was just gridlock. Everybody had to leave and they were just stopped on the road for hours. And a couple weeks ago, I had a very dear friend of mine involved in a tornado that blew her 100-year-old house away. And not in totality, but two of the four walls and the roof were gone. And this house had been there for almost 100 years and had weathered many, many storms, but this one it did not. But thankfully for her, it was a disaster one. It was a localized thing. She had plenty of help, and they worked around it, and they were able to salvage things, and they had enough people to help. But what if in a disaster you don't have plenty of people to help? What are you going to be capable of doing? And I know for me that if I stay in my house, I'll be better off. But what this did also do for me is it forced me to gather the things I already own and put them together. So I put all the tapes together, all the tools together, all the medicine in one place, because it's like when I go on vacation, I always overpack, and I pack like what I wear at home. I have a different pair of shoes for each different outfit. If you had to leave in a hurry, you can't take all that with you. And again, water is an important thing to carry, but water is very heavy, so you have to have a way around that. So if I had to live outside, I probably wouldn't last 48 hours. I whine when I'm in church and it's too cold. I am such a Goldilocks. But if I had to be outside and I haven't prepared for it with like tarps and mylar blankets and things that could keep me warmer, I would be in much worse shape than had I not prepared at all. And again, once you get outside, if you feel you have to leave your home because the proximity is too close to you or you're feeling unduly threatened, you then expose yourself to even more risk that you never saw coming. I've camped once and I vowed I'd never do that again. But it doesn't mean that I don't think about these things because I've read the dystopian novels. I've read the books where there's an EMP attack and there's always one prepper and he's well prepared and he knows what's happening. And then the rest of them, the rest of the neighborhood scrambles and flounders. And at some point, there's a lawless element that comes into play. And again, that's disaster three, possibly in one and two, but not as likely. So I don't tell you all this to scare you. I'm just telling you, talk with your family, talk with your friends, talk about what's going to happen if in disaster one, it's localized. If it's in disaster two, it's a little more widespread and it's going to take a little longer. Or in disaster three, is all out lawlessness and war. Now, again, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, so I know that whatever happens, He'll guard me through that. But if I don't plan at all, then that's kind of not being very loyal either, because He's told me to prepare. For what? I don't know. For when? I don't know. He didn't tell me all that. So all I'm telling you is to be prepared. We'll see you next week on The Blind Zone.